Okay, recording. All right, here we go. Star Wars Celebration has announced a lot of new projects coming down the pipeline, including 3 new Star Wars films. Now, I made a mistake in my previous video where I discussed that it was going to be episodes 10, 11, and 12. That is not what was said. I was not at Celebration, so I had to look deeper into it. It was actually 3 separate movies with 3 different filmmakers at 3 different parts of the Star Wars timeline. So we're going to be discussing all of that today on this edition of Geekdom Movie Talk, discussing basically these 3 films, what Lucasfilm and Disney need to do to improve based on the previous reception to the last 3 movies, episodes 7, 8, and 9, and go into all of that. So joining me, you heard him for the Rocky Show. He's back now discussing Star Wars. It's Reel to Reel from KRW Network. What's up?
What's up, Geekdom? Always a pleasure to be here, especially with this news, because my goodness, Star Wars over the last couple of years has just been in flux, like literally just on television. So
just
3 new films, especially with these films that we're going to be talking about, I think is pretty exciting.
It is exciting, but I'm also very cautious. I'm very cautious because, and we'll talk about this a little bit here, Kathy Kennedy. I'm not one of those guys that just makes 15,000 Kathy Kennedy videos over and over again about how she's terrible. People who are talentless, like Mike Zero and Doomcock. Yeah, I'll say the names. I don't care. But I don't think she's a very good leader, and I think that she really was a big reason as to why the sequel trilogy flopped. She has to learn from her mistakes. And what I'm worried about is they're going to have these filmmakers come in and then just fire them, replace them. All of this stuff could realistically happen. It's just, I don't want it to, because it's a big mistake. So what we're going to do is I want to go ahead and start talking about these movies, but I want to first of all ask you just your prediction. Do you think that these 3 filmmakers, James Mangold, Dave Filoni, and Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, do you think they're actually going to make these movies, or do you think because of the history that they're not going to really make them and somebody else will come in and do it, or they'll cancel them?
I think over under, I feel like one of these is going to get canceled just because of the recent history of Star Wars movies getting canceled left and right. Things that we didn't even know about. That's really crazy to me. But no, I think Dave Filoni obviously going to make this. He's been kind of the head honcho of the Star Wars on television, Disney Plus, for the last couple of years.
No, longer than that. He was the one who was around with George Lucas in the Clone Wars. That was Filoni's like his number 1 student, you know?
Okay. Yeah, then I can't possibly see him walking away or being, manhandled out of this.
I agree.
In fact, it kind of seems to me that if all of this stuff about Kathleen Kennedy is going to happen, then maybe this is the way for them to kind of push her out and put him in the front spot. If that is what they're doing, I mean, who knows? James Mangold, I don't think it either, because this guy, Disney poster child at this point, with Indiana Jones coming up, they must really like that movie if they're positioning him to do another Star Wars film. And then I have to say, this Shireen woman, I think
Sharmeen, yeah, she's most famous for, she did Miss Marvel for Disney Plus, and then she did a movie called A Girl in the River, The Price of Forgiveness. She's also one of these activists, and I think that is the part that kind of is going to turn some people off if they make this movie so like political. She has done a lot of television, but now she's doing a movie. That was a big problem with the other movies, bro, is that it was too political. It wasn't like the major problem, I don't think, but some do think it was. So hopefully she won't do that here.
Well, the thing is she's kind of the odd man or odd woman out of this. It seems like, yes, she has a lot of experience, decades of experience, but she seems like the weakest option here with a movie that is kind of continuing the story of Episode 9, something that the studio, Kathleen Kennedy, Lucasfilm, whoever, can bully around to make the movie that they want to make. The other 2, not so much. I feel like those 2 guys are going to be able to kind of hold their ground and make the movie that they want to. It seems like this is one of those directors that has not done something on this scale before, and when you give these big movies to those type of directors, they usually end up making a very by the numbers movie. I feel like, speaking of Star Wars, go back when Colin Trevorrow was supposed to make Episode 9. A lot of people liked Jurassic World. I'm not a huge fan of it, but he was doing very small budgeted movies before this, right? These people aren't really like these people don't have the experience of making small movies, then medium-sized movies to gigantic movies, right?
Yeah, right. I agree. No argument. But the thing that worries me is her activism. So let's actually talk about these movies one by one. The first one I want to discuss is the Dave Filoni project. Now, this one is actually, to me, I think this one has the potential to be great, and it's something that I actually wanted. Basically, the Dave Filoni project, he's making a movie that's going to be about the escalating war between the Imperial Remnant and the New Republic, a cinematic event in the Mando timeline. So what this is going to be, and I thought about this when Mando, like season 1, this is going to be basically like a big season finale for Mando, where you're going to have your TV shows, you're going to have your episodes, and that's going to build up to a huge movie that Filoni will do, and I'm excited for that because it's Dave Filoni. He preserves Star Wars as better than anybody else does. I'd like to see the Imperial Remnant and the New Republic do battle. We've only read about that. I'd love to see the Battle of Jakku. That'll lead right into Force Awakens, even though obviously sequel trilogy is bad. They're not going to retcon it, no matter what you may read on the internet. They're not going to get rid of it. But the idea of it being like a cinematic event where you have to watch Mando, Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, all these different films, and they're building up to a big sort of crossover movie. This is a page right out of Kevin Feige's playbook, and it's a smart one. And I think that right there is going to make money. What do you think?
Oh, for sure. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if this is the very first movie on the list, even though people are talking about it as if it's going to be mixed in there, maybe even the second one.
Yeah, it's the order they announced it.
Yeah, just because the way that it's kind of positioned with the television shows that have been going on, and they're building that universe on Disney Plus. I feel like once this movie comes out, if this is going to be the Avengers level event film for the Disney Plus shows, then this gives you kind of free range to start recontextualizing the shows and rebooting them in ways that make it a little bit more exciting for people than jumping back from the movie into Disney Plus. So you have the Mandalorian, right? Which is a widely popular show, even though the ratings for season 3 are a little bit down. Maybe after this event and all of this stuff comes together, you can kind of softly reboot The Mandalorian and put these characters and situations into one show and then expand out from that. So instead of The Mandalorian, you reboot it into like The Mandalorians or something like that. You know what I mean?
I mean, that's something they could definitely do. They did something similar with The Bad Batch. The Bad Batch is in many ways a continuation of the Clone Wars. It is. I mean, it genuinely is. So, but it's not the same thing. I actually like the idea because it rewards people for watching the Disney Plus shows, and from a business perspective, when they announce this, people who are, maybe not watching these shows are going to start watching them now because they know they're important. It's kind of a brilliant move. They know that if you don't watch these shows and you go see this movie, you might be missing some context. And that's totally out of Feige's playbook, and I like it. We could see all kinds of cool stuff here. Now, I want to
say one thing about this before.
Yeah.
The only issue I have with all of this is that you are putting that content behind a paywall. There's no other way to access this legally besides getting
That's
Disney
the
Plus.
idea, though, man. You got to pay.
I know.
Yeah.
But I feel like I think that's one of the things that's kind of hurting Marvel now, and is starting to become more apparent as we go into Phase 5 and onward. So they do have to be careful.
Right, I agree. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the Charmin Obaid-Chinoy film. Actually, no, let's save that for last. We'll talk about Ray at the end. James Mangold, who is currently directing. Oh, that's already done. But I mean, he is the director of Indiana Jones 4. I like him because he's not like a Star Wars, kind of a nerdy filmmaker, sort of like J.J. Abrams. He did films like 3:10 to Yuma, Ford versus Ferrari. He did Logan, which is a classic. Like, this guy is a filmmaker. He makes movies. He's probably the closest guy to doing a Star Wars / Marvel film to like somebody like Scorsese, where it's about the characters. He's really good at doing character films. I mean, hell, he did Girl Interrupted. So I am excited for this. The story behind this is going to be a deep prequel existing probably even before the Old Republic about the first Jedi to ever wield the Force, or the Prime Jedi. And that's a super deep prequel, and it's something that I've always been curious about even as a kid. Like, how did the Jedi ever even discover the Force? How did they figure out how to make it work and manipulate it? You don't just get born with these abilities. I mean, you have the midichlorians, but it's still something that you have to learn. So if this movie answers that question and it's separate from the whole Skywalker thing, I'm down. What do you think?
No, yeah, I love the idea of doing some kind of a. Who knows if it's going to be kind of a samurai film or a Western film. James Mangold does a lot of Western-centric
He's
films,
good at
like
it.
3:10 to Yuma, Logan, even. So, yeah, I would much rather see something like that. My most anticipated thing about this movie is that we are getting away from contemporary Star Wars timelines, like within that 60-year period from the prequels all the way to the sequels,
right,
and everything in between, and we're going back way far. I feel like the Star Wars universe can survive in that realm. They have in games, comic books, novels, and all this other stuff. We've never really seen that put to screen, so that's the most exciting thing about this. And obviously, having any story on the big screen focusing on Jedis is always going to sell tickets. So, yeah, that for me is one of the most interesting things. Although, like you said, I think James Mangold being a part of this gives me a lot more confidence in the idea of it than just simply the idea of it. Like, this is a guy who can bring it to life.
Yeah, I really like his movies, bro. I love Copland. Like, he's a good filmmaker. Then we have Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. We talked about that earlier, the whole thing with, she's kind of an activist, and this film, the fact that it's about Rey also, this film could have a lot of personal politics and, woke stuff in it, which I know a lot of people don't like. I mean, I know some like it, some don't. It's very divisive. This story is basically, it's not called Star Wars Episode 10, but in many ways it is, because it's going to follow the story of Rey 15 years after the Rise of Skywalker, and it's going to be about rebuilding the new Jedi Order. Like, that right there is literally the plot for Episode 10. But maybe they have realized that they can't really mess with the numbered stories anymore. Maybe it's because those are the Skywalker movies. So instead they'll do like a Rey trilogy, but they'll just call it something that's, catchy. I don't really know. And I don't even know if it's going to be a trilogy, but it's going to continue the story of Rey. Rey is a very polarizing character because in the sequel trilogy, there was a lot of bad writing around her. This is the chance for them to redeem themselves, and I think the idea of it is not as terrible as some think it is, because you're going to have a different writer, you're going to have a different filmmaker, and it's going to be just about Rey. I think if they plan this out and actually plan this out without rushing to make it, without, like with the other movies, being worried about the internet. No, just tell a story and put it on the screen. That's all I want. So what do you think about this Star Wars Episode 10, or the sequel to the sequel trilogy? I guess you can call it that, right?
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be a bridge film. Like you said, I don't think that they're hesitant at this point to start doing numbered sequels again. You can't just simply jump into 10, 11, and 12 to do a trilogy, because, frankly, the way that they ended Episode 9, it was more of a way of allowing all these other characters to branch off and do their own things, be it them spin-offs or Disney Plus shows or something else like that. It wasn't focused enough to then go ahead and tell another trilogy. They could have put it together that way, but as you've already said, they didn't plan out the sequel trilogy well enough to have it kind of flow into that realm. This might be a way of, I guess you could say, making up for that, they might want to get back into episode 10, 11, and 12, because let's be clear, Star Wars is numbers, right?
I mean, yeah.
Like you could do like a prequel, you could do something set in the Mando timeline, you could do something set after episode 9 or whatever. But if you come out and go, we're going to do 10, 11, and 12, people go crazy, especially if you give it enough time. This could be a bridging film where you set up Rey, you set up other characters, you set up new threats and everything, and you jump off of that to do those sequels in the future. And that's kind of my thoughts on it. Whether or not it's a good film or not is yet to be seen. As I already mentioned, I would really like the Dave Filoni Mando film to be the first one, because I feel like that has enough momentum around it.
I agree.
I think that this should be the last. If they're going to release them in 2025, 2027, and then 2029, this should be the 2029.
Did they say those dates, or are you just assuming?
No. I'm just pulling those out of my, just because, the timeline around it, and they're doing it every 2 years if that's what they do. I feel like that has to be, it's 15 years. It's closer to the 15-year time jump if they save it for the very last one. It gives them enough time to put together the story. Mm-hmm. And as I said, it would allow them to create an idea of what the next trilogy is going to be. And with the way that Rise of Skywalker ended, you can technically have it still be the Skywalker saga,
Yeah, I mean, it is and it isn't. That's the tricky part. I will say that I agree, but it's funny because I'm in like Darth Melvin's Discord server, and those guys are super, like, they hate anything involving Rey, and they just, anything involving the sequel trilogy, there's just a group of fans that are just not going to dig it because of what they did with 7, 8, and 9. They're just Rey being in the trailer, Rey being in the film, just that. And they're not all just sexist people like they want you to believe. It's just the sequel trilogy left a real bad taste in people's mouths. It's legit. Not everyone, but a lot of people. And some just don't care about Rey because in some people's mind, those are non-canon because George Lucas wasn't involved. So it's a complex thing. It's going to suck because let's say this is a great movie. Let's say this movie is able to redeem Rey, tell a great Rey story, and really do some creative stuff and good character stuff. It's going to be unfortunate that people are just not going to experience that because of the thing that happened before. But that's really Star Wars' fault. That's Kathy Kennedy's fault for how she botched up the other trilogy. But at least maybe on home video they'll watch it if they hear it's good. But this movie has to be like overwhelmingly good is what I'm saying. Like, there has to be people who hate the sequel, who hate the sequel trilogy saying it's good. If you can find people like that, then you're good. If you can make the movie that good. If not, and you do the same thing you did before, I don't know, man. It's going to end up being a waste of money, to be honest with you.
Here's the thing.
They'll make money no matter what, though.
I agree with all of this. I agree that you have to make a really good movie, and you can win over, potentially, in the back end of all of it, you can win over the people who really hated the last 3 films. But here's the thing, and one of the reasons I think that this movie needs to come out last of the 3. Say it does come out around, 2029 or 2030. The Force Awakens came out in 2015.
Right.
I believe.
Yeah, 2015.
If I was 5 years old watching that, 5, 6, 7, whatever, watching that on the big screen, enjoying that movie, right? By the time this movie comes out, the sequel to that trilogy, I'm in my 20s, right? The prequel trilogy has experienced a renaissance from people who aged into like prominence and had the ability to go online and express their love and passion for those movies because they grew up with them.
Not just that, but not just that. I want to also say the Clone Wars and the Clone Wars TV show really helped give more context to the prequel trilogy, and it really added new layers to it. So I do credit, and that's Filoni right there. I do credit that as helping as well, because I get those movies more now than I did before the shows. Clone Wars.
Yes, but let's be clear. Like, Disney is going to keep pumping out things. They're going to put out stuff in the interim that's going to help the sequel trilogy, especially as they get to a point where we're far enough away from the sequel trilogy that people aren't as dogmatic about their hatred about it, right?
Right. That's why you're saying give it time to chill.
Give it time to heal. Give it time to chill. Give it time for people who were young watching this movie to grow up and become voices in online communities to express their love for them. And there will be a similar renaissance. Because, look, one of these movies is going to be bad. Something is going to be bad. Something's going to be like, well, yeah, the prequels were bad, but the sequels are worse, right? That's going to happen again. These things are
of course, yeah. I mean, but you're always going to have those fans that were so disgusted with, like, the sequels, they won't even give this a chance. And I can't even blame them, to be honest. I think they're going to need a fire trailer. They're going to need a lot of, they're going to need, honestly, bro, if they really want to get this over, they're going to have people go out there and be honest and say, okay, they have to. Disney never does this, bro. They never do it, and it's really annoying. They need to go out and admit. They have to admit that they made mistakes. They have to admit that they treated some fans wrong and they're trying to make up for it. If they admit that, that's going to go a long way. I learned a long time ago, and this is a life lesson. This is not a speak, but it's a life lesson. People who go to prison give you this advice. People who are in the mafia give you this advice. The two most powerful phrases you can say in the world is please and thank you. Those are very powerful. And people don't understand how powerful they are. If you're polite and if you're honest and if you're humble and you say, okay, we fucked up with the old movies, we're going to try and make it up to you, that will go a long way with people. I think it will go a long way.
It feels like this is what, I agree with you, they're never going to outright say that, but this is kind of feeling like that, right? Them even bringing back Ray to do this movie, like, literally, just a couple years ago in 2019, it felt like everybody involved with this sequel trilogy was done. They weren't outright saying it.
Well, Boyega said it, and actually, Boyega said it. And do you remember what Oscar Isaac said? He's like, if I need to buy another house, I'll do it. I love that guy.
Right. They were. I think that they were just all done. Like,
yeah, I think so too.
Was just done.
The fandom would just tore them up.
There's either a really good story here, or Disney, put a dump truck of money on Daisy Ridley's house and then goes, hey, come back. We promise it's going to be better. We're doing our best to make up.
Mark, she's not exactly doing a lot of work anyways. Like I got a buddy of mine who's out in Hollywood. And the thing about Hollywood is, and you know this because you said in the past you wanted to be a filmmaker. In Hollywood, people are very, 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 very shallow. And I'm not saying Daisy Ridley is ugly, but she doesn't have that super marketable look that other people have. Like, for example, Scarlett Johansson, like that marketable, super hot look. And because of that, my friend called it years ago. He's like, she might be a great actress, which she is. She killed it as Ray as far as the acting performance goes. She's great. But if she doesn't have that LA Hollywood beauty, she's probably not going to do that much work. She's not going to end up like Scarlett Johansson, who was in everything. So, and I'm not saying this because I believe that. I'm saying it because he said it and he's right. So I think Star Wars might be her thing, and that's fine. Hey, she's going to make more money on this movie than any of us are going to make in years probably. So let them do it. I just want it to be good. Like, same thing with Indiana Jones 5. Same thing with the Ahsoka trailer. There's things in the trailers that look great. I just want it to be good. I want it to be fun. I want to have a good time with it. That's it.
There's one last question here because I feel like it's
go for it. Then we'll close up.
There's one thing that's really important. One of the things that you talked about with the extension of the Creed verse, the Rocky universe expanding. You were very adamant by saying I don't want it to continue. End it while while you're still on
man.
Hype.
I feel the same way about
same way here. I mean, seriously. They're continuing. It's Star Wars. It's never going to end. What are your thoughts on them just continuously pumping it out and also doing sequels to the sequel trilogy? Like, is there room in something like Star Wars, or do you have the same thought like they should just end it because you know.
Yeah, well, I felt that way for a while, but Mandalorian kind of saved me. The difference between the Rocky universe and the Star Wars universe is that Star Wars has so many different races, so many different planets, so many different powers, so many different, Jedi, Sith. There's so many elements to Star Wars that one thing about George Lucas, like him or not, he is one of the kings of being a lore master. Same thing with people like J.R.R. Tolkien. They create these giant worlds and this mythology, right, that they borrow from like Buddhism or whatever. So Star Wars is pretty much tailor-made to have hundreds of stories told. Even before the prequels and definitely before the sequels, the EU was pumping out tons of books every year. The difference is that with Rocky, it's just basically a boxing movie about overcoming obstacles. And it's a great series. We've talked about that there. But you can only do this X number of times before it ends up becoming repetitive. With Star Wars, there's so much more to do. You could have a movie that's set 200 years in the past, 200 years in the future. You could do like a planet we've never heard of. Because it's space, and space is endless. Whereas with Rocky and / Creed, there's only so many stories they can tell. That's my opinion. That's the difference between the two.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. I just thought it was an interesting comparison because both of these are kind of contemporaries.
Plus, to add to that, Star Wars fucked up with the sequel trilogy. Rocky / Creed did not. Creed did. The first two Creed films literally did what the sequel trilogy should have done. They showed respect to the past. Rocky was the Luke Skywalker character, and he was had his own issue, and an elder, ex-Jedi or ex-fighter who now has knowledge, and then, has to deal with it, right? Creed did it right. I don't want them to start making 10,000 Creed movies because the more movies you make, the higher the chance of it doing bad. I had a conversation, this will be the last thing before we close out, with a buddy of mine about One Piece. One Piece is really long, and I was kind of messing with him, but I was pretty serious too. The ending of One Piece, no matter what Oda comes up with, is going to be a problem because not everyone's going to like the ending. If people don't vibe with it, it's going to be like Sopranos or like Lost, where they got invested in this for so long. So many chapters, so many years, literally 2 decades of One Piece. And if the ending's being built up, and if the ending is not satisfying to the audience, it's going to make the entire time you're into it feel bad. It's going to make it feel like crap. With Creed, bro, they're not quite there yet, but they're close to being there. And I just wanted to say that, like, people don't look at these things and think about them. Same thing with the MCU. I mean, I was saying back during Phase 3 that at some point we're going to hit a roadblock. We're going to hit a wall where the movies become repetitive. That's what Ant-Man 3 was criticized of doing, even though it was a problem before. Eternals, Black Widow, these movies did not get anywhere near the hype that the Phase 3 films did. Phase 3 was almost perfect. So, like, you know what I mean? Like, the longer and bigger something is, the higher the chance it's going to end up sucking. And that's the unfortunate truth. And with Star Wars, I want them to make a new movie to make up for the crap they already did. I would like that. But we'll see.
I agree with that. I agree with all that. It's just you also can mention Game of Thrones in that, or like an ending can ruin the entire experience and make it impossible to go back to, right? So
that's why you know what?
Problems.
That's why I like movies more than TV shows. I understand that there are some great television shows, The Wire, House of Cards, all these shows, Walking Dead, the one that you also are into. But movies, beginning, middle, and end. It's a short story. It's easy to digest. Even if it's like a freaking 4-hour movie like Irishman, it's still a simple story. And even if you do a film series, it's fine. But when you're talking about TV shows, if something starts going on for years and years and years and years and years, the higher chance of it flopping is there. I mean, look at Mando season 3, dude. Like, it's not flopping, but it's not capturing the imagination that the first two did. So that's my point, bro. Anyways, y'all, check out KRW Network. Please go do that right now. Real to Real talks about movies on there. And what else? Walking Dead and Saw, right? You're still doing that?
Yeah, like just television shows and movies. Just literally running the gauntlet with whatever I want to talk about.
It's basically whatever you like. And that's what I think more YouTube channels should be like. Just talk about whatever you like. Here on World of Geekdom, I talk about movies, TV shows, video games, just whatever doesn't fit with Geekdom 101, I put on here. But anyways, bro, thank you again. We're rambling now. Thank you again. We'll see. Let me know in the comments what y'all think. We'll see you in the future.